The emergency broadcast pierced through every communication channel in human space with a frequency that made teeth ache and metal vibrate. Admiral Torres had been reviewing supply reports in his cramped office aboard the Defiance when the alien transmission began, and now he sat frozen as the translated words filled the room with their impossible meaning. To all sentient species of the galaxy, we, the representatives of the Galactic Council, hereby announce our formal surrender to the entities known as the Devourers. After 17 standard cycles of warfare and the loss of 43% of our combined military forces, we have concluded that resistance is futile. We advise all remaining civilizations to prepare for peaceful integration with the Devourer Collective. The transmission continued with technical details about surrender protocols and evacuation procedures, but Torres had stopped listening. Through his viewport, he could see the lights of Earth glowing in the distance, blissfully unaware that their alien neighbors had just rolled over and died without consulting anyone. The same aliens who had spent decades lecturing humans about their violent tendencies and primitive warfare tactics had apparently decided that giving up was preferable to fighting. Commander Price burst through the door without knocking, her face pale and her hands shaking as she clutched a datapad. "Sir, you need to see the tactical reports from the Rigel sector. The Devourers aren't just conquering planets, they're consuming them. Entire worlds are being converted into raw materials for more of their machines." Torres took the pad and scrolled through footage that defied comprehension. Massive geometric constructs, each the size of a city, systematically dismantled planets layer by layer. What had once been thriving worlds became expanding clouds of metallic dust that formed into new Devourer units with mechanical precision. The alien fleets that engaged them lasted mere hours before being overwhelmed and incorporated into the growing swarm. "How long before they reach human space?" Torres asked, already knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 3 months, maybe 4 if they stop to fully process the Centauri colonies. "But sir, the Council's surrender means we're on our own. Every alien civilization with jump-capable ships is evacuating toward the galactic rim. They're abandoning everything." Torres set down the pad and walked to his wall display, where a holographic map showed the galaxy in real time. Red zones marked Devourer-controlled space, spreading outward from the galactic core like a cancer. Yellow zones indicated alien evacuations and surrenders. Only one small cluster of blue remained active near the outer rim, marking human territory. "Have you ever seen a human surrender, Commander?" Torres asked without turning around. "No, sir, I haven't." "Neither have I. Signal all fleet commanders for an emergency conference. And get me a direct line to Earth Command. If the galaxy thinks this war is over, they're about to learn what happens when you corner a species that evolved from persistence hunters." Within hours, holographic projections of human military leaders filled the Defiance's main briefing room. Admiral Chun commanded the Pacific Fleet from her position near Jupiter. General Murphy oversaw ground forces from his headquarters on Mars. Dr. Hayes appeared from her research station in the asteroid belt, still wearing the lab coat that marked her as humanity's leading expert on alien technology. "The situation is simple," Torres began without preamble. "Every other species in the galaxy has surrendered to an enemy that converts entire planets into more copies of itself. They expect us to evacuate or submit like civilized beings. I propose we show them why our ancestors conquered their own planet before they learned to make fire." General Murphy leaned forward, his scarred face showing the kind of smile that made enemy generals request transfers. "What do we know about these Devourers? Can they be killed?" Dr. Hayes activated her own holographic display, showing detailed scans of Devourer technology. "They're adaptive machines, but they're still machines. They learn from each engagement, developing countermeasures for whatever destroyed their units. The alien fleets use predictable energy weapons and defensive formations, so the Devourers learn to counter those specific tactics." "What about unpredictable tactics?" Admiral Chun asked. "Humans don't exactly follow standard military doctrine." That's our advantage. The Devourers adapt to specific threats by analyzing patterns and developing counters. But what if there are no patterns? What if every attack is different, every engagement uses completely different weapons and tactics? Torres nodded slowly as the plan began to form. We overwhelm their adaptation systems. Hit them with everything we have, all at once, from every possible angle. Kinetic weapons, energy beams, nuclear warheads, chemical explosives, biological agents, gravity manipulators, electromagnetic pulses. Make it impossible for them to adapt because they can't predict what we'll do next. The aliens will think we're insane, Commander Price observed. Good, let them think that. While they're running away to die slowly at the galaxy's edge, we'll be doing what humans do best, finding new and creative ways to break things that aren't supposed to be breakable. The conference continued for hours as humanity's military leaders planned the most chaotic defensive strategy in galactic history. Every ship would carry multiple weapon systems from different technological families. Every engagement would use tactics that violated alien military doctrine. Every battle would be an exercise in controlled madness designed to confuse an enemy that relied on logical adaptation. When the meeting finally ended, Torres stood alone in the briefing room, staring at the tactical displays that showed humanity's tiny presence in a galaxy full of surrendering civilizations. His communicator chimed with an incoming message from Ambassador Thek of the Altarian Collective, one of the few aliens who had bothered to maintain diplomatic contact during the evacuation. Admiral Torres, I must express my species' admiration for humanity's courage in the face of certain extinction. Your refusal to abandon your worlds, while ultimately futile, demonstrates a noble spirit that will be remembered by the survivors. Torres recorded his reply with the kind of calm certainty that had made him humanity's youngest fleet admiral. Ambassador Thek, with respect, you seem to have misunderstood our intentions. We're not preparing to die with dignity. We're preparing to win a war that everyone else was too frightened to fight properly. When this is over, you're welcome to return to your homeworlds, assuming there's anything left of them to return to. The transmission ended and Torres returned to his viewport where Earth continued its ancient rotation, unchanged by the galaxy's surrender or humanity's decision to stand alone against impossible odds. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Devourers continued their methodical advance, unaware that they were about to encounter a species that had never learned the meaning of acceptable losses. Dr. Hayes had always preferred the silence of space to the chaos of planetary laboratories, which made her current assignment aboard Research Station Prometheus both perfect and terrifying. Floating in Neptune's shadow, the station housed humanity's most desperate scientific project, learning how to kill something that had already proven unkillable to 43 different alien civilizations. The Devour Fragment in Containment Bay 7 defied every principle of physics Hayes had learned. During her 20 years of xenobiology research, the piece of metallic machinery, no larger than her fist, continuously attempted to reshape itself despite being held in a quantum stasis field. Its surface rippled with patterns that hurt to observe directly, as if the material existed in more dimensions than human minds could process. Still trying to phone home, muttered Dr. Webb, her research partner whose expertise in destructive materials testing made him invaluable and slightly unhinged. He poked at the containment controls with the enthusiasm of a child dissecting insects. Every few minutes it broadcast some kind of signal toward the galactic core, probably telling its friends what kind of weapons we used to capture it. Hayes nodded absently while reviewing the combat footage from humanity's first encounter with a Devourer scout. The alien refugees had described these machines as unstoppable forces of nature, but the video showed something far more interesting, an enemy that could be surprised. The human patrol ship had used an improvised tactic involving mining explosives and civilian cargo containers, and for exactly 17 seconds, the Devourer had hesitated before adapting its defenses. Webb, look at timestamp 47 minutes. 12 seconds. What do you see? Webb squinted at the display, his perpetually coffee-stained lab coat making him look more like a mad inventor than humanity's leading expert on making things explode efficiently. The Devourer stops moving for a moment after the cargo container detonation. Its surface goes from adaptive camouflage to solid black, Exactly, it's processing. The adaptation isn't instantaneous, it requires computational time, and during that processing period, it's vulnerable to follow-up attacks using completely different methods. The implications hit both scientists simultaneously. Hayes began pulling up every piece of combat data humanity had collected on Devourer technology, while Webb started calculating blast patterns and weapon combinations with the manic energy that made his colleagues request transfers to safer assignments. If adaptation takes time, we can exploit the delay, Hayes said, her mind racing through possibilities. Hit them with kinetic weapons to trigger the adaptation process, then immediately follow up with energy weapons before they can adjust. Then switch to chemical explosives, then electromagnetic pulses, then gravity distortions. Better yet, Webb added, his eyes gleaming with dangerous inspiration, we design weapons that change their attack method mid-flight. Kinetic penetrators that deploy energy charges after impact. Energy beams that carry biological agents. Chemical explosives that release gravity waves. Make it impossible for them to adapt because the weapon itself keeps changing. The research. Station's computer systems whined in protest as Hayes and Webb began running combat simulations that violated every principle of sensible military doctrine. Their virtual devourers, programmed based on alien intelligence reports, struggled to counter attacks that shifted between weapon types faster than their adaptation algorithms could process. Meanwhile, throughout human space, the greatest military production effort in the species' history was transforming every available resource into instruments of barely controlled destruction. General Murphy had taken over coordination from his command center on Mars, where massive holographic displays showed the progress of humanity's most ambitious engineering project. Status report on the retrofit program, Murphy barked to his aide, Lieutenant Foster, a young officer whose main qualification was an ability to remain calm while her commanding general planned increasingly insane military operations. All major shipyards are operational, sir. The Titan yards completed their first batch of modified cruisers yesterday. Each ship now carries 17 different weapon systems from 8 different technological families. The crews are calling them flying junkyards. Murphy grinned with the satisfaction of a man who had spent his entire career preparing for the war everyone said would never come. Good. What about the new tactical doctrine? The training programs are causing some problems. Sir, our pilots are used to specialized equipment and predictable engagement patterns. Teaching them to switch between 17 different weapon systems while flying evasive maneuvers is resulting in higher than acceptable simulator crash rates. Define acceptable, Murphy said, reviewing footage of human pilots attempting to master combat techniques that no sane military would consider viable. These people are about to face an enemy that adapts to everything they try. I'd rather have pilots who can improvise with broken equipment than pilots who follow perfect procedures. Right into enemy adaptation zones. The training facilities on Mars had become laboratories for controlled military chaos. Pilots learned to fly ships loaded with incompatible weapon systems that required constant manual recalibration. Ground troops practiced using alien technology. They barely understood alongside human weapons that their ancestors would have recognized. Engineers designed equipment that was intended to break down after limited use, forcing constant tactical adaptation. Captain Rivera watched her crew struggle with the Indomitable's new weapon loadout, which included kinetic accelerators, plasma cannons, nuclear torpedo tubes, chemical mine dispensers, gravity wave generators, and electromagnetic pulse arrays. The ship's computer required constant manual overrides because the weapon systems were never meant to be integrated on the same platform. Ma'am, the plasma cannons are interfering with the gravity wave generators again, reported Ensign Davis, whose previous experience with experimental weapons made him the closest thing to an expert they had. We can fire one or the other, but not both simultaneously. Then we alternate. Rivera replied with the kind of calm acceptance that separated veteran officers from those who broke under pressure. Plasma first to trigger their adaptation, then gravity waves while they're processing the change. If the systems overload, we'll switch to kinetic weapons and fix the problem later. And if the kinetic systems fail too? Rivera smiled with the confidence of someone who had learned warfare from a species that conquered its planet using pointed sticks and determination. Then we ram them. The Devourers might be able to adapt to our weapons, but I doubt they're expecting a 5,000-ton cruiser traveling at combat velocity. The alien refugees who remained in human space watched these preparations with mixtures of admiration and pity. They had seen the Devourers in action, witnessed the systematic destruction of civilizations that had mastered technology humans were still learning to understand. The mathematical certainty of human extinction was obvious to any species that could perform basic strategic calculations. Ambassador Thek had established a temporary embassy on Luna, partly to maintain diplomatic contact and partly to observe humanity's final days with the morbid fascination of someone watching a natural disaster in slow motion. His daily reports to the evacuating alien fleets described a species that had apparently decided to make their extinction as expensive as possible for their enemies. The humans continue their military preparations, despite mathematical proof that resistance is futile, he transmitted to the Altarian refugee fleet. Their latest tactical doctrine appears to be based on the assumption that unpredictability itself can be weaponized. They seem to believe that if they can make their own behavior incomprehensible, their enemies will be unable to adapt effectively. Is there any logical basis for this strategy? Came the reply from Admiral Kess, who commanded the remnants of the Altarian Navy from their position near the Galactic Rim. None that our strategic analysts can identify. The humans appear to be applying the same methodology they used to dominate their homeworld, overwhelming aggression combined with tactical flexibility. Their military leaders speak of victory as if it were inevitable rather than impossible. The transmission ended, leaving Thek alone in his embassy overlooking the lunar surface where human engineers were installing weapon systems that violated several interstellar treaties. In the distance, Earth continued its rotation, unchanged by the galaxy's surrender or the approaching extinction of the species that had made it their home. Dr. Hayes completed her final report as Research Station Prometheus prepared to relocate closer to the front lines. Her conclusions would soon be distributed to every human military unit in the galaxy, along with detailed instructions for exploiting the 17-second window when Devourer adaptation systems were vulnerable to alternative attack methods. Webb, are you ready to find out if our theories work in actual combat? Webb looked up from his calculations, his coffee-stained lab coat and manic grin making him look like humanity's most dangerous graduate student. Ready? I've been waiting my entire career for the chance to test weapons that no rational military would approve. Win or lose, this is going to be the most interesting war in galactic history. The Kepler sector had once been home to the Procyon civilization, a peaceful species of aquatic beings who specialized in quantum mathematics and artistic expression. Now it served as humanity's chosen battlefield against an enemy that had already consumed 17 star systems and showed no signs of slowing its mechanical appetite for total conversion. Commander Walsh adjusted her fighters' targeting systems while reviewing the tactical nightmare that awaited Task Force Ragnarok. Through her cockpit display, the Procyon homeworld appeared as a partially consumed sphere surrounded by geometric horrors that defied human comprehension. Each Devourer construct measured several kilometers in length and moved with the deliberate precision of machines that had perfected the art of systematic destruction. All squadrons, this is Volf Leader. Remember, we're not here to win through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. We're here to confuse the enemy so badly that their adaptation systems have nervous breakdowns. Switch weapon types every 30 seconds, maintain maximum chaos, and try not to shoot each other while you're being unpredictable. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace bore no resemblance to the elegant formations that alien militaries had used for millennia. Admiral Torres had arranged his ships in patterns that violated every principle of sensible fleet composition. Heavy cruisers mixed with light destroyers, research vessels flew alongside battleships, and cargo haulers converted into weapon platforms drifted through formations that changed configuration every few minutes. "Contact in 30 seconds, reported Commander Price from her position aboard the Defiance. Devourer forces are maintaining standard defensive positions around the planetary conversion site. They appear to be treating us as another conventional fleet engagement." Torres nodded grimly as he watched the tactical display populate with enemy contacts. Dozens of Devourer constructs, each one capable of destroying entire alien battle groups, continued their methodical work of converting the Procyon homeworld into raw materials. Their behavior suggested complete confidence in their ability to handle yet another group of organic beings wielding predictable technology. "Signal all units to commence Operation Kitchen Sink. Fire everything we have in the most illogical sequence possible." The first wave of human attacks struck the Devourer formation with weapons that no rational military would have combined on the same platform. The heavy cruiser Manchester fired kinetic penetrators at significant fractions of light speed while simultaneously deploying clouds of chemical mines that released corrosive agents designed to eat through alien metal. The destroyer Prague followed up with plasma cannons and gravity wave generators that created spatial distortions around the enemy constructs. The Devourers responded exactly as Dr. Hayes had predicted. Their adaptive systems began analyzing the kinetic weapons and developing countermeasures, while simultaneously trying to understand the chemical composition of the mining agents. For 17 precious seconds, their defensive capabilities were focused on processing threats they had encountered before, which was when the second wave hit them with weapons they had never seen. Commander Walsh led her fighter squadron directly into the Devourer formation, her ship armed with what human engineers had dubbed the impossible loadout. Her primary weapons were biological agents that targeted the quantum processors alien technology used for computational tasks. Her secondary systems deployed electromagnetic pulses calibrated to interfere with adaptive shielding. Her emergency weapons were nuclear warheads with variable yield timers that exploded at random intervals. "Wolf 2, hit the big one with everything that starts with the letter P," she called to her wingman, Pilot Rodriguez, whose fighter carried plasma cannons, particle beams, and photon torpedoes alongside more conventional explosives. "Copy, Wolf Leader." Engaging target with alphabetical weapon systems. The Devourer constructs found themselves under attack by methods that challenged their fundamental programming. They had adapted to energy weapons by developing energy-absorbing hulls, but the humans immediately switched to kinetic attacks that bypassed energy defenses entirely. When the Devourers adapted to kinetic weapons by creating impact-dispersing armor, the humans deployed chemical agents that ignored physical protection. General Murphy watched the battle unfold from his command center on the heavy cruiser Unstoppable, where banks of monitors showed weapon effectiveness ratings that changed every few seconds. His tactical staff consisted of officers who had been selected specifically for their ability to make decisions that violated standard military doctrine. "Sir, the biological weapons are showing 60% effectiveness against Devourer computational systems, but their adaptation rate suggests they'll develop countermeasures within 2 minutes, reported Major Kim, whose expertise in unconventional warfare made her invaluable for operations that no sane military would attempt. Then switch to gravitational attacks in 90 seconds, followed by dimensional weapons 30 seconds after that. Keep them guessing until their processing systems overload." The battle became a demonstration of humanity's fundamental approach to impossible problems. If conventional solutions don't work, try unconventional solutions until something breaks. Human ships fired weapons in sequences that made no tactical sense but created computational chaos for enemies that relied on logical adaptation. The cargo hauler Persistent converted into a mobile weapons platform, deployed devices that created temporary black holes alongside systems that generated antimatter particles and equipment that fired concentrated beams of coherent gravity. Its captain, an ex-merchant marine named Brooks, coordinated attacks that would have been impossible using standard military equipment. Antimatter spread, full dispersal, followed by gravity beam concentration on Target 7. Brooks ordered with the casual tone of someone discussing cargo manifests rather than weapons that violated several interstellar treaties. Sir, our antimatter systems are interfering with the gravity beam generators, his tactical officer replied. Then we'll use them separately and fix the interference later. The point is to keep the enemy confused, not to build perfect weapons. The Devourers began showing signs of computational stress as their adaptation systems struggled to counter attacks that changed method and intensity every 30 seconds. Their formations, previously characterized by mechanical precision, started showing hesitation and uncertainty. Some constructs stopped their conversion work entirely and began defensive maneuvers that served no logical purpose. Dr. Hayes monitored the battle from her position aboard the research vessel Discovery, which had been equipped with sensors capable of analyzing Devourer adaptation patterns in real time. Her displays showed enemy processing systems operating at capacity as they struggled to develop countermeasures for weapons that kept changing their fundamental nature. Their adaptation algorithms are overloading, she reported to Admiral Torres. They're trying to counter 17 different attack methods simultaneously, and their processing power isn't sufficient for parallel adaptation. They're beginning to prioritize defensive measures, which means they're no longer optimizing for conversion efficiency. How long before they adapt to our chaos strategy? Unknown, sir. They've never encountered enemies that deliberately used incompatible weapon systems. Their programming assumes that advanced civilizations would optimize their technology for efficiency rather than confusion. The answer came sooner than expected, but not in the form anyone had anticipated. Instead of adapting to human weapons, the Devourer constructs began withdrawing from the Procyon system entirely. Their retreat was orderly but unprecedented, marking the first time in recorded galactic history that the machines had abandoned a conversion operation before completion. Commander Walsh pursued the retreating enemy with the ruthless efficiency of a species that had evolved from persistence hunters. Her squadron continued attacking the withdrawing Devourers, switching weapon types every few seconds to prevent adaptation, while maintaining pressure on systems that were clearly operating beyond their design parameters. All units maintain pursuit, but do not attempt to engage in extended combat, Torres ordered. Our objective was to disrupt their operations and test their adaptation limits. We've accomplished both goals. The battlefield fell silent as the last Devourer construct disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind the partially converted remains of the Procyon homeworld and clear evidence that the supposedly unstoppable machines could be forced to retreat. Human ships began recovery operations while their crews struggled to comprehend what they had just accomplished. Command, this is Volf Leader reporting mission success, Walsh transmitted as she guided her damaged fighter back toward the fleet. Enemy forces have withdrawn from the engagement zone. Repeat, the Devourers are retreating. The transmission was picked up by every human military unit in the galaxy, and within hours it had reached the alien refugee fleets fleeing toward the galactic rim. For the first time since the Devourer threat had been identified, the machines had encountered resistance they could not simply adapt away. Admiral Torres stood in the Defiance's observation deck, watching human recovery teams work among the debris of a battle that should have resulted in humanity's extinction. The partially consumed Procyon homeworld hung in the distance, a monument to alien surrender and human refusal to accept the impossible. Signal Earth Command, he ordered. Inform them that Phase 1 is complete. The enemy can be forced to retreat. Now we find out if they can be forced to surrender. News of humanity's victory at the Kepler sector spread through the galaxy's communication networks faster than the speed of light, carried by quantum entanglement transmitters that connected every major civilization to a shared information grid. Ambassador Thek received the tactical reports while standing in his temporary embassy on Luna, staring at data that contradicted everything his species understood about warfare and survival. The humans had not merely survived contact with the Devourers. They had forced the ancient machines to retreat from a conversion operation for the first time in recorded galactic history. The mathematical impossibility of this outcome challenged fundamental assumptions about technological superiority and adaptive warfare that had governed interstellar relations for millennia. "Impossible," muttered Dr. Venn, the Altarian military analyst who had spent decades studying Devourer combat patterns. His crystalline form flickered with patterns of confusion as he reviewed footage of human fighters diving directly into enemy formations while firing weapons that violated basic principles of tactical efficiency. Their combat doctrine appears to be based on deliberate chaos rather than strategic optimization. Vec activated his emergency transmitter, broadcasting directly to the Altarian refugee fleet and the 17 other alien civilizations that had evacuated toward the Galactic Rim. His message would reach them in hours, carrying news that would challenge their decision to abandon the galaxy to mechanical invaders. To all evacuation fleets, this is Ambassador Vec reporting from human space. The humans have engaged the Devourers in direct combat and achieved tactical victory through methods that our strategic computers classify as impossible. They appear to have discovered a fundamental weakness in Devourer adaptation systems through the application of unpredictable weapon combinations. The response came within minutes from Admiral Kess aboard the Altarian flagship Serenity. "Ambassador, please confirm your previous transmission. Are you stating that the humans have successfully resisted Devourer assault?" "Confirmed, Admiral. Furthermore, they have extended an invitation for any species willing to return and participate in organized resistance. They claim their tactics can be taught to non-human military forces." The silence that followed stretched across interstellar distances as alien commanders who had accepted inevitable extinction suddenly confronted the possibility that surrender had been premature. The humans, dismissed by most civilizations as primitive warmongers obsessed with violence, had apparently solved a military problem that had defeated the combined wisdom of 43 different species. On Mars, Colonel Kim supervised the construction of humanity's first interspecies military training facility, a massive complex designed to teach alien warriors how to fight like humans. The cultural challenges were immediate and profound, beginning with fundamental differences in how various species understood the concept of acceptable risk. The cetacean delegates are having difficulty with the concept of ramming attacks, reported Captain Liu, whose background in xenopsychology made her invaluable for training programs that required species to abandon millions of years of evolutionary programming. Their civilization has never developed tactics that intentionally result in equipment destruction. Kim nodded while reviewing applications from alien military officers who had begun arriving on Mars within days of humanity's victory announcement. The diversity was staggering. Crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic resonance, gaseous entities that existed as distributed consciousness, insectoid warriors whose hive-mind coordination made human tactics seem chaotic by comparison. What about the Rigelian combat specialists? They're adapting well to kinetic weapons but struggling with the biological agents. Their species has never developed warfare that targets living systems, so they're having ethical concerns about weapons that kill rather than disable. Explain to them that the Devourers aren't alive in any sense they understand. These are machines that convert entire planets into more copies of themselves. Standard rules of civilized warfare don't apply when facing an enemy that treats entire species as raw materials. The training programs that emerged challenged every assumption about military cooperation between different species. Alien recruits who had spent centuries perfecting elegant combat techniques found themselves learning to coordinate chaotic attacks that violated basic principles of tactical efficiency. Commander Voss worked with a group of Andromedan warriors, whose natural telepathic abilities made them ideal for coordinated operations. But their species had never developed tactics that relied on deliberate confusion. Their attempts to master human-style weapon switching resulted in mental feedback that left some recruits unconscious. The difficulty appears to be psychological rather than technical, Voss explained to Colonel Kim during their daily briefing. They understand the weapon systems perfectly, but their minds reject the concept of using incompatible technologies simultaneously. They keep trying to optimize our chaos. Then we need to break their optimization instincts. Have them practice using broken equipment that requires constant improvisation. Make unpredictability a survival skill rather than a tactical choice. Meanwhile, human engineers worked around the clock to retrofit alien ships with weapon systems that had never been designed to function together. The technical challenges were staggering, requiring integration of technologies that operated on completely different physical principles. The Altarian cruiser Harmony arrived at the Jupiter shipyards equipped with elegant energy weapons that could precisely target individual molecules. Human technicians immediately began installing kinetic accelerators, chemical dispersal systems, gravity wave generators, and nuclear warheads alongside the existing systems. "Sir, the Altarian captain is concerned about the structural integrity of his ship," reported Engineer Davis, whose expertise in impossible modifications made him essential for operations that violated manufacturer warranties. He says the weapon combinations we're installing will destroy his vessel's harmonic resonance. Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from schematics that showed 17 different weapon systems crammed into spaces designed for 3. Tell him that's the point. His ship is supposed to be unpredictable, not harmonious. If the enemy can predict his weapon systems, they can adapt defenses. If his own ship doesn't know what it's going to do next, the enemy certainly won't. The alien crews that began training on these hybrid vessels struggled with human military philosophy that treated equipment failure as an acceptable tactical outcome. Their civilizations had spent millennia developing technology that operated efficiently and predictably. Concepts that directly contradicted humanity's approach to warfare. Captain Brooks supervised the integration of Procyon, mathematical targeting systems, with human explosive technology aboard the converted cargo hauler. Relentless. The combination allowed for precisely calculated chaos, enabling weapons that could adjust their attack method mid-flight based on real-time tactical analysis. The Procyon observers are requesting clarification about our ammunition storage procedures, Brooks reported to Admiral Torres during their weekly progress review. They're concerned that we're storing incompatible explosive types in the same compartments. What did you tell them? That we're hoping for accidental interactions that create new weapon types we haven't invented yet. They stopped asking questions after that. As alien crews began graduating from human military training programs, the galaxy witnessed the emergence of hybrid tactical doctrines that combine species-specific advantages with humanity's fundamental principle that unpredictability was a weapon in itself. Crystalline beings learned to coordinate resonance attacks with kinetic bombardments. Gaseous entities mastered atmospheric warfare techniques that complemented orbital strikes. Insectoid warriors developed swarm tactics that utilize controlled chaos rather than perfect coordination. President Santos addressed the growing alliance from her office in Geneva, speaking to representatives of species that had begun returning from their evacuation toward the galactic rim. Her message was broadcast throughout human space and transmitted to alien fleets that were slowly reversing course toward their abandoned homeworlds. The galaxy faces a choice between extinction through surrender and survival through resistance. Humanity offers our tactics, our weapons, and our commitment to victory against any odds. We ask only that you abandon the assumption that civilized warfare can defeat an enemy that treats civilization as raw material. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within weeks, alien volunteers began arriving at human training facilities faster than instructors could process them. Species that had never cooperated in peacetime found themselves united by humanity's simple observation that any enemy could be defeated if you were willing to break enough rules in the process. Ambassador Thek watched the transformation from his embassy on Luna, where alien ships now arrived daily carrying warriors eager to learn humanity's approach to impossible problems. His reports to the returning evacuation fleets described a military revolution that challenged fundamental assumptions about warfare and survival. The humans have created a doctrine based on the principle that adaptation itself can be weaponized against adaptive enemies. They treat their own unpredictability as their greatest strategic advantage, and they appear to be successfully teaching this philosophy to other species. Dr. Hayes completed her analysis of the growing alliance from her new laboratory aboard the research station Hope, which had been equipped with technology from 12 different civilizations. Her conclusions would shape humanity's next phase of operations against an enemy that had never been forced to retreat from organized resistance. The Devourers are learning from their encounter with human tactics, but their adaptation is limited by their fundamental programming. They can counter specific weapon types, but they cannot counter the principle of constant tactical evolution. As long as we keep changing our methods faster than they can adapt, we maintain the initiative. Colonel Kim read the report while watching. Alien trainees practice coordinated chaos maneuvers that would have been impossible for any single species to develop independently. The sight of crystalline beings working alongside gaseous entities and insectoid warriors, all united by human tactical doctrine, represented something unprecedented in galactic history. "Are we ready for the next phase?" Torres asked during their final planning session before the Alliance's first major offensive operation. Kim looked out at the training facilities where representatives of 19 different species were learning to fight like humans while contributing their own unique capabilities to tactics that no enemy could predict or counter. As ready as anyone can be for a war that shouldn't be winnable. The question is whether the Devourers are ready for an enemy that gets stronger by breaking its own rules. The combined armada that assembled at the Galactic Core represented the largest military cooperation in recorded history. But Admiral Torres knew that size alone would not determine the outcome of humanity's final gambit against the Devourer threat. From his position aboard the Defiance, now equipped with weapon systems from 37 different civilizations, he watched alien ships attempt formations that would have been impossible before human tactical doctrine taught them to embrace controlled chaos. The Altarian cruiser Harmony drifted alongside the crystalline Rigelian battleship Resonance, both vessels now armed with weapon combinations that violated every principle of efficient military design. Insectoid fighters from the Centauri hives flew in swarm patterns that deliberately broke their own coordination to prevent enemy pattern recognition. Gaseous entities from the Vega systems had learned to weaponize atmospheric disturbances alongside human-designed explosive charges. Dr. Hayes monitored the massive fleet from her position aboard the research vessel Discovery, which had been transformed into a mobile laboratory capable of analyzing Devourer adaptation patterns across multiple dimensional frequencies. Her displays showed readings that defied comprehension as the enemy's primary manufacturing facilities came into sensor range. The Galactic Core blazed with artificial light as millions of Devourer constructs worked in perfect coordination to convert stellar material into more copies of their mechanical collective. Entire star systems had been systematically dismantled and rebuilt as geometric factories that stretched across distances that dwarfed planetary orbits. The site represented industrial efficiency on a scale that no organic civilization had ever achieved. Target analysis complete. Hayes reported to the Fleet Command structure that now included representatives from 19 different species. The Devourers have spent 6 months preparing for our arrival. Their adaptation systems have been upgraded to counter every weapon type we used in previous engagements. Commander Walsh led the advanced fighter screen toward the enemy perimeter. Her squadron now including pilots from 12 different species, who had learned to coordinate attacks while maintaining the unpredictability that made human tactics effective. Her own ship carried weapons that had been designed by committee, combining human engineering with alien technology in ways that no single civilization would have attempted. Volf leader to all squadrons, commence Operation Total Confusion. Remember, we're not just fighting the Devourers, we're fighting their expectations about how civilized beings conduct warfare. The battle began with an assault that challenged every assumption about military cooperation between different species. Crystalline beings deployed resonance weapons that created harmonic distortions while simultaneously coordinating with human fighters launching kinetic penetrators. Gaseous entities generated atmospheric disruptions that concealed the advance of insectoid swarms, wielding weapons that combined biological agents with conventional explosives. The Devourers responded with defensive measures that had been specifically designed to counter each alien species based on their traditional combat methods. Energy-absorbing fields activated to counter Altarian plasma weapons. Harmonic dampeners engaged to neutralize Rigelian resonance attacks. Atmospheric processors deployed to clear gaseous interference. Chemical neutralizers spread throughout the combat zone to counter biological weapons, which was when the human trained. Alliance revealed the true scope of their tactical revolution. The Altarian ships immediately switched from plasma weapons to gravity wave generators that had been installed by human engineers. The Rigelian vessels abandoned resonance attacks in favor of kinetic bombardment, using ammunition that violated several interstellar treaties. The gaseous entities began deploying solid projectiles through their atmospheric disturbances, while the insectoid swarm switched to electromagnetic pulse weapons that had never been part of their technological development. General Murphy coordinated the ground assault from his position aboard the mobile command ship Unstoppable, watching as the tactical doctrine he had helped develop was tested against an enemy that had perfected adaptation as a defensive strategy. His displays showed weapon effectiveness ratings that changed every 30 seconds as both sides adapted to new threats and countermeasures. Status report on adaptive countermeasures, he called to Major Kim, whose expertise in unconventional warfare had made her essential for operations that no rational military would attempt. Enemy adaptation systems are showing strain, sir. They're cycling through defensive configurations faster than their processing power can optimize. The alien crews are maintaining weapon-switching protocols, but their efficiency is improving with each engagement. Good. Signal all units to commence Phase 2. Time to show the Devourers what happens when you corner a species that learned warfare from persistence hunters. Phase 2 of the assault involved tactics that would have been impossible without the unique capabilities each alien species brought to humanity's fundamental approach to chaotic warfare. Crystalline beings began using their natural telepathic abilities to coordinate weapon switches across multiple ships simultaneously, creating attack patterns that changed configuration faster than enemy sensors could track. Gaseous entities learned to use their distributed consciousness to control multiple weapon systems independently, essentially becoming living fire control computers for chaotic weapon combinations. Captain Rivera commanded a mixed crew aboard the heavy cruiser Indomitable, where human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to maintain weapon systems that were never meant to function together. Her tactical officer was a Procyon mathematician, whose quantum calculations enabled precise targeting for deliberately imprecise weapons. Her gunnery chief was an insectoid warrior whose hive mind coordination had been retrained to manage controlled chaos rather than perfect efficiency. Ma'am, the gravity wave generators are interfering with the dimensional displacement cannons again, reported Ensign Davis, whose previous experience with experimental weapons made him the closest thing to an expert they had for equipment that violated manufacturer warranties. Then alternate their firing sequences and route power through the backup systems. Rivera replied with the calm certainty of someone who had learned to treat equipment failure as a tactical opportunity rather than a problem. If our own weapons don't know what they're going to do next, the enemy certainly won't be able to predict our attack patterns. The Devourer constructs found themselves facing an enemy that challenged their fundamental programming in ways their creators had never anticipated. Their adaptation systems, designed to counter logical threats through systematic analysis, struggled to develop countermeasures for attacks that deliberately violated basic principles of tactical efficiency. When they adapted to energy weapons, the Alliance immediately switched to kinetic attacks. When they developed kinetic defenses, the fleet deployed chemical agents. When they neutralized chemical threats, the combined forces began using weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dr. Hayes watched the enemy's computational systems approach critical overload as her sensors tracked adaptation. Attempts that were failing faster than new threats could be processed. The Devourers had never encountered enemies that used their own unpredictability as a weapon, and their programming could not compensate for tactics that were designed to confuse rather than optimize. Their central processing network is showing signs of cascading failure, she reported to Admiral Torres. The individual constructs are no longer sharing adaptation data effectively. They're beginning to operate as independent units rather than a coordinated collective. How long before complete system breakdown? Unknown, sir. We're witnessing the first recorded instance of an adaptive artificial intelligence suffering from information overload. Their behavior is becoming increasingly erratic as they struggle to process tactical data that contradicts their basic operational assumptions. The answer came not through gradual deterioration, but through a sudden and unprecedented event that shocked both sides of the conflict. The largest Devourer construct, a massive factory ship that had been converting entire stars into raw materials, simply stopped functioning. Its adaptation systems, overwhelmed by months of chaotic input from human-trained forces, shut down completely. Commander Walsh led her fighter squadron through the debris field that had once been the galaxy's most efficient construction facility, pursuing Devourer units that were no longer coordinating their defensive measures. Their retreat was not tactical, but desperate, the behavior of machines whose programming could no longer cope with enemies that refused to behave predictably. All units, maintain pursuit but prepare for possible enemy adaptation, Torres ordered, though his tactical displays showed Devourer forces that were clearly operating beyond their design parameters. Their withdrawal appears to be systemic rather than strategic. The pursuit continued across 3 star systems as Devourer constructs abandoned conversion operations that had been running continuously for decades. Their behavior became increasingly erratic as their collective intelligence fragmented under the weight of tactical data that their adaptation algorithms could not process. The final engagement took place in what had once been the Procyon home system, where the Devourers had established their first major construction facility. The enemy's last functional units made a desperate attempt to defend their primary data center, but their attacks lacked the coordination that had made them unstoppable against previous opponents. Captain Brooks coordinated the final assault. From his position aboard the converted cargo hauler Relentless, where human weapons worked alongside alien technology to create attack combinations that no enemy could predict or counter. His crew included representatives from 8 different species, all trained in humanity's fundamental principle that chaos could be more effective than coordination. All weapons, continuous rotation, maximum confusion, Brooks ordered with the casual tone of someone who had spent months learning to treat impossible odds as routine problems. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them efficiently, we're trying to destroy them unpredictably. The last Devourer facility shut down as its central processing systems finally succumbed to months of adaptive overload. The galaxy fell silent. For the first time in decades, as the ancient machines that had consumed countless civilizations simply stopped functioning. Admiral Torres stood in the Defiance's observation deck, watching human and alien recovery teams work together among the remains of an enemy that had been defeated not through superior technology but through superior unpredictability. The partially restored Procyon homeworld hung in the distance, testament to the fact that surrender was not inevitable when facing impossible odds. "Signal all fleets," he ordered. "Inform them that the Devourer threat has been neutralized. The galaxy is secure." Ambassador Thek received the transmission aboard his embassy ship, where he had been documenting humanity's approach to warfare for the historical records of 19 different civilizations. His final report would describe how a species dismissed as primitive warmongers had saved the galaxy by teaching other civilizations to embrace chaos as a weapon. To all evacuation fleets, this is Ambassador Thek reporting the end of hostilities. The human-led alliance has achieved total victory through tactics that our strategic computers still classify as impossible. The Devourers have been neutralized, and all species are free to return to their homeworlds. Dr. Hayes completed her final analysis of the conflict from her laboratory aboard the Discovery, where she had witnessed the first recorded defeat of an adaptive artificial intelligence through the simple expedient of giving it more tactical data than it could process. Her conclusions would reshape galactic understanding of warfare and adaptation for generations to come. The Devourers were defeated not by superior technology but by superior unpredictability. They could adapt to any specific threat, but they could not adapt to the principle of constant change itself. Humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization may be the demonstration that flexibility is more valuable than perfection. Colonel Kim watched the integration of human and alien military doctrines from her training facility on Mars, where representatives of dozens of species continued learning the essential human art of making the impossible look routine. The sight of former enemies working together to restore devastated worlds represented something unprecedented in galactic history. Torres remained on the bridge as the Defiance began its journey back toward Earth, where a species that had never learned to surrender would celebrate the end of a war that everyone else had declared unwinnable. In the distance, the lights of restored civilizations began flickering back to life across a galaxy that had learned the difference between giving up and fighting smart.